My why is because I believe every single person deserves to be heard. That every single person has greatness within them.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Master Your Life. I'm Kate McKay, the guest and host today. We are presenting a beautiful, beautiful couple, and we have Jay and Rebecca Madden. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here. Thank you.
This is one of the episodes that I was like, okay, I gotta go. I was so excited to hit play button just because I have so many questions. And I didn't really want to have very much pre-conversation because I wanted to be like right here that the audience can experience your powerful story, be able to share that and change people's lives. So a quick intro about you. And I usually have a longer one, but with you, I want a nice and short one. So they're inspiring couple who bringing the book Breathless Haste, Finding God in Ordinary Life. That's their book here. And again, all of everything will be shared in the show notes. And their mission is really clear to help others grow in faith through every day, through the mess and the beautiful moments that is life. And their warmth and wisdom and realness are such a gift. And I can't wait for you to hear their conversation. So let's dive in. So thanks so much. So, Rebecca, if you don't mind sharing the story, the conversation that you had, I believe, with your mom,
Yes.
a little bit of a background on this book, which I love.
Yes, I'm happy to share that. So, through the years, we've spoken in different ways, in different groups, different neighborhoods along the way, in different churches, different states, and people would stop us and say, that story, like, you need to write a book. And so we just kind of kept hearing this, you need to write a book. And I was a math major, so that was not my normal inclination. And so we just kind of ignored them for some number of years. And then when COVID hit, I thought, wow, maybe now's the time to, really think about what these people have said. And so I kind of started writing some of the stories. And then my mom was, I think, about 97, and she was in her bed at home. So I climbed up in the bed with her and I said, do you want me to read you some of the stories I've written? And she said, yes, I would love that. And so I started reading, and it wasn't too far into some of the stories that she said, well, is Jay writing his stories? And I said, no, he's not. And she said, well, he should. And so I called Jay and I said, guess what? My mom thinks you need to write this book with me. And he was like, no, thank you.
No.
Yeah, because you had just done something pretty Herculean yourself and probably were
Yes.
just about sick of reading and writing and arithmetic.
Yeah, I just finished my dissertation, so I didn't want to get anywhere near writing anything. So
Right.
persuade me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God had other plans. So if
Mhm.
you could just talk a little bit about the reason why this book was written.
Well, again, I think that it was just all these people encouraging us along the way. And we do have some pretty amazing and crazy, ordinary and miraculous stories of where God has kind of intervened and guided us. And so we just kind of felt like through these people, we were kind of being pushed through them by God to say, these stories need to be in writing and not just in your heads or in your journals. And so we just felt a real sense that we should write them down. And it took us quite some time to do that, but we did have 25 plus years of journals. We both journaled, which is very unusual, I think. And these books gave us this content of the stories, and some of them were so long ago, it was like, wow, I didn't even remember that detail. And then he would check his book and he would say, well, I have something very similar. So it just kind of confirmed the details of our stories and made it much more easier to put together since we had previously written a lot of the stuff down. So
I found that very helpful when I was reading the book, that I felt like I was there and I was like, wow, there's a lot of detail in this. And I felt those experience. So can you tell us about Brock?
yeah, you want to tell them about Brock?
Yeah, so Brock was our first child, and when he was born, we immediately realized he had some birth defects, and the most serious of which was a heart defect. And so he did fine as a baby, but then he had to have surgery when he was 6 months old, and had the surgery. And the short story is he just really never woke up. He went back into surgery again, had a lot of complications, and so just really just a devastating experience for us.
Yeah. And we had done a lot of work
Yes.
around which hospital to go to, what surgery, what surgeon, like we didn't feel like we just picked the wrong doctor. Like we really felt like we went to the leading doctor for this particular heart defect. So, so we didn't feel like we made a mistake in that because we'd really done a lot of research. I think if we'd have just gone to the local hospital, we would have second guessed ourselves, but we went to Alabama for surgery where the best heart surgeon was. So
You went to the best of the best. And you really
Yeah.
did. I mean, when I read through how you chronicled and researched while pregnant and with that, just an incredible story. Can you describe what was Brock like as a human when he was with you? How would you describe him?
Well, just recently, it's been 30 plus years. So in some ways you almost felt like it didn't happen. But just the other day, I just saw his smiling face in a picture and his just eyes, just like he was just a happy baby, growing baby. He was like 16 pounds when we took him to surgery. So he wasn't like a suffering infant, like many of the children were when we got to that hospital. So he just seemed so normal. Like we just had no idea that anything was going to happen other than he was going to recover well, because he just seemed so normal other than the fact that he needed to have this heart surgery. So
Healthy.
healthy, looked healthy, just
Beautiful little boy.
Yes.
I'm sorry about the loss. And I'm not sure if you know this too, that I lost a son and his name was William. So I loved it that you have a son named William. I was like, oh, that's so awesome.
That's so sweet.
Yeah,
Love that.
Yeah, me too. I was like, that got me all warm inside. So one of the things that I found really significant in your book was the different ways that we grieve, particularly as men and women. And one of the articles that I wrote, I had a column in a newspaper for 8 years. And when my son died, I was a public figure, right? Like you guys were in your church, like everyone knew who you were. And people, it was like, how is she going to handle this? And I was like, well, publicly and in the mess of it all and in faith that I am walking in the light of God. But one of the articles that I wrote was about how men express grief and loss. And it's very, very different. So, Jay, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because you talk about that in the chapter. And one line in particular, I was very interested in because it came up a couple times. God, you're not going to push me away. So, first of all, I guess the first question is, what do you think about that? The whole concept of grief and loss and how it is differently manifested in men and women. And then, second off, what that sentence meant to you.
Yeah, so I think I think it's hard to paint with too broad a brush because everyone is different. But for me, I'm a lot more reserved. I don't cry easily. Normally, when I'm sad, I go into a shell. Just want to be by myself. And so for us, that was a challenge because Rebecca is more. She was more likely to cry, to verbalize her pain, and I was more likely to stuff it. And so, which is not healthy at all, but that was my pattern. And so that was hard because, she could easily have been like, well, this doesn't seem to be bothering you because you're not crying. Or we found it as, there'd be times where she would be feeling better and then I would be in a funk, or, I would be really, like, okay, I'm going to try to move on. And she would be struggling. So that's really as a couple where it just takes you got to give each other a lot of grace and realize that you're not going to go through that process exactly on the same timing. And so you have to be willing to go, okay, that's where she is. This is where I am. We just got to walk through it together and respect each other's.
And how it looks for both of you. And I think that that's the most interesting part, that you were able to stay in the love and the respect of the relationship. And I want to say honor that, because that is unusual for couples that lose children.
Yeah, it can be a very, very divisive experience. And and I don't think I think I know enough about grief to know there's what we consider healthy ways to grieve and unhealthy ways to grieve, but I'm not sure there's like really a right and a wrong way to grieve. because people are just wired differently, and they bring their experiences before that grief into this experience. And so that was sort of me with I'm not going to let God push me away, because I had lost my father at a young age. I had lost my grandfather, who I was very close to. I had these people that I felt like, that I really loved, and I had prayed that they would get well, and they didn't. So like this was just another like blow. And so I think that's where the comment came of just feeling like, is God just trying to push me away with all this stuff?
And you're like, God, you're not pushing me.
Yeah.
It's just so fun. It's such a funny line. You even say that, like, I don't even know where that came from,
Right.
but there was something in that that was a seed. And I love that you weaved it in towards the end of the book as well. So I was like, I burst out laughing when I read that, because I was like, that's such a funny thing, but it's so human. It's just the way that it is, right? And
Right.
that almost to me felt like the crack in the armor of you saying, I am resilient. I am going to stay in the light. I am going to stay here, and I will be in the love and the relationship with you, God, whether you like it or not. So,
Right.
Rebecca, how did you deal? And what was it like being in a relationship with a man through grief, for you? Because I know both of you, the beautiful thing is I love that you had so much support, and so few people do. So that's something I really want the audiences and the viewers to hear, is that you're never alone, and there are people there to serve you. And it's our job to ask for the help, and because people are waiting to bring you a meal. They're waiting to be a word, or just to hold space for you. And particularly men, sometimes it's just a text, hey, thinking of you. And that's a guy's going to feel real good and not feel alone. Something as small as that. Yeah. So Rebecca, how did you deal with that grief and having it look so different in your husband?
Yeah, I'm sure I got frustrated with him. But occasionally he would say, all you want to do is talk about it. And I would respond, well, all you want to do is not talk about it. And so we would just realize that. And I think in car rides and stuff, we would have those conversations, because I think when you're not looking at each other directly, and you can just kind of say what you're feeling without staring at one another, just conversations along the way in a car talking about it. And just realizing that we were really different in how we grieved. But I think we knew that we did not want it to separate us. And so we gave each other room and grace to grieve in the way that was the way that we grieved, and just somehow cheered each other along. I did probably more counseling than you did. We had some grief groups and stuff like that. And in our community of believers at our church in Greenville really took such good care of us. That to this day, I would say if we had not had that church community around us, we would not be where we are. I'd probably be in a padded cell somewhere, having lost my mind. But they
Yes.
kept bringing love and serving and holding our hand and bringing us clinics along the way, and just helping us get through that really long valley.
Which
There's
is,
no shadow.
yeah, and for you too, because you're a person that's a doer and serves. And so isn't it interesting that really God comes in when we are in the place of reception? In some
Yeah.
ways, I looked at the death of my son as he was a sacrificial lamb for the healing of because I lost my brother was murdered at the same age. So it was like, yeah. So it was like, I was like, oh, this is coming up for me to do the healing, for me to be able to do it for the generations, right, to come. And I didn't take that lightly. And
Right.
and I think that it can be very messy, because if you're doing grief differently than it was modeled for you, it's just, and so for me, it was like, oh, heck no. So what would be, I would love it if both of you or one of you, or however, what tips would you give for couples that are going through hardship? What are some tips? Maybe each of you can give some on how to stay in the love and respect for each other for the relationship.
Well, surround yourself with people who love you individually, and can help you grieve, and continue to try to love, date, walk, just go through it step at a time, and give each other grace all along the way.
Yeah, I think a lot of communication, it's easy to kind of lose your communication in your grief. And so really be intentional about that. And just if you can find a way to imagine that one day it's going to be different, that you're not going to be in that place forever.
Mhm.
And that's hard to do when you're in the middle of it. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's a struggle, but it's worth it.
Mhm.
And I was going to ask you this at the end of the interview, but this seems like an appropriate place to drop this, which is I will stand on my pillar, or I will stand at my post. And so that's sort of like you're standing on the post of the commitment to marriage, the
Mhm.
commitment to each other. And I think that's a very significant line.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
just think for us, I just think we had a sense that if we lost each other, it was a double tragedy. And so you know, we just kind of fought our way through it. I don't really know how to explain it because I look back on it and I'm like, how did we get through all that?
Exactly.
But just God's grace and really prioritizing our relationship, I think.
Mhm.
Isn't it funny when you look at someone who's going through like they lost a child, like Casey in our church, and we're like, oh my gosh, like how awful is that? She lost a child, and we're like, oh yeah, we did. And in a way, for me, it feels like I honor myself at another level to know that I'm still here and bringing the sunshine, even though. But isn't it sometimes shocking when you feel so bad? Oh my gosh, how are they doing it? And then you're like, oh wait, I did that.
Right.
Right.
And you just our lives show these people who have these tragedies that life can go on and it can be meaningful and joyful again. It may take a while, but it can be.
Yeah, I do think time helps. I mean, it does. I do think um, as life goes on, time can be part of the healing process.
Right. It's
But
funny when people say that like time will heal, right? But at the same time, yeah, and it's true. And what were you going to say, Rebecca?
yeah, it's time plus working through it. It's
Exactly.
not like it's not staying stuck where you were and time's going to heal it. Like you've got to work through it a day at a time. And I feel like time, in some ways, it feels like it was 100 years ago when he died, and it also feels like yesterday. So time is a weird thing as far as grief goes too. It can be uh, like literally like so far long ago, and also yet so close.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I bring up that experience of like being with someone who's had immediate loss, and it can come so fresh within us, the memory of the feeling, and yet we can still stand in with people in that because we know. And I will often say everything or do everything that I wish I got, which is just I'm here for you no matter what. It's going to be dark, but there will be light. All the things that I was like, how come no one said that to me? I think that's why
Mhm.
it's so awesome to be a podcaster and a coach and a speaker, because I can say all the things that I wish people told me.
Right,
One of them
exactly.
is really a significant one. I remember just briefly, I had a coach and I was like, I'm going to do really well in your class. And I shook his hand, and he was someone that was very well known. And I said, I'm going to do great. And he looked at me and he goes, I believe you will. And I was like, it literally threw me up against the wall because I was like, someone believes in me.
Mhm.
And I think that for me, that is the faith journey, is instilling and believing in others and being the light for others, being on that pillar, that place, that watch for others. And do you feel that the things that you've gone through have put you in a more powerful place? Obviously, you're both leaders at Peachtree. Obviously, Rebecca, you're head of the ministry, and you, Mr. J, are pastor. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your journey, obviously
Yeah.
online and offline. So, how is that? Do you feel that this what you've gone through has put you in a better position to be able to stand in for people?
Um, I believe that it set the direction of our life, honestly.
Wow.
Because when Brock died, I had grown up in faith, but when he died, it was where it was like, okay, the rubber meets the road here. Like, do you really believe this, or do you just kind of believe this? And it was at that point that God put this sentence on my heart that there is a heaven. And it just kind of it feels like it was just permanently written in my heart. And it was at that moment that I was like, okay, I'm going to bet my life on this.
Can
And
you
so,
describe that a little bit more about, because that is in the book, and all of you got to get this book on Amazon. I'll be sharing the link, but can you share that moment?
I don't recall the moment. It was just right at some point right after he died, and just feeling like it wasn't audible, but there was just like this presence of these words that there is a heaven. And that I guess God knew that was exactly what I needed to go forward. And so I just wrote it in my journal one day when I felt like he put it on my heart. And I literally don't know how it happened. It was just, I don't even know where it was. I just know that it just happened soon after he died. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, I'm going to really believe this and then bet my life on it. And so it just really changed our whole life. And I feel like that's how God has redeemed the story of his death, is by saying, okay, he died, you will see him again, but let me give you a trajectory that you're going to help other people when they're walking through the valley, and you're going to be part of, faith-based communities from now on. And the love that came around us was another just secondary thing, that it was like, okay, well, this is the foundation for people's lives, is to have communities like these.
And it buoyed the way.
Yes.
It's like I just picture the two of you like bobbing along in the grief bob, boing,
Yeah.
boing. And then,
Exactly.
just, catch me, God.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful story. Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that. And
Mhm.
I got goosebumps with you, with that knowingness that you have. And that truly is what I feel with you when I met you, and obviously the incredible work that you do at the church and the value you bring. I'm deeply honored to know you and be part of your ministry. And Jay, could you share your journey a little bit? Because only child, wow, Jay, what's that like?
You probably really want to know.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that explains so much, right?
It really does.
Well,
Like from
the
my
funny thing
side,
is,
I'm like, I don't
yeah,
know.
well, you only know what you know, right? So
Yeah.
when you're an only child, you don't have anything to compare it to. And so I grew up as an only child, and then I was college, some time in the military, and then went into business with my father. And then after he passed, went into another business. And um, I guess it was like my version of a midlife crisis. I just had this, especially after what we had been through with our kids, and I was finding most of my fulfillment in things I was doing, like as a volunteer, ministry stuff, and just really work felt like I was wasting my life doing that. And so that was just me. Like that's not for most people, but that was the way I felt. And I felt like, okay, do I want to kind of go through the rest of my sort of career, the best years of my life, just sort of living sort of vacation to vacation and just kind of going through the motions? Or do I really want to kind of give my life to something I'm really passionate about? And so I just had this very strong sense that, I wanted to go into some kind of full-time ministry, but I didn't really think it was being a pastor. I thought it was maybe, like working for like an organization or that kind of thing.
Like faith leadership in some way, right?
Yeah, like something. And so so I was in a business, and I was like, God, if you help me sell this business, I'll do whatever. And
He literally said whatever, which is not a great thing to
and
say.
he took me up on it, and it like sold really quick. And I remember Rebecca saying, "So you're going to get out of the boat?" And I said, "Oh, I'm out of the boat." Like, and it sounds cool to be like, "Oh, you sold your business," and but it's not really that cool when you don't know what you're going to do, And so, and you have small kids, and Rebecca's at home, and but fortunately, we were in a church that they had a pastor retiring, and they asked me if I would come on and sort of do his role in the interim while they were finding someone. And so it was an easy thing to say yes to, because it was a church we were attending. It was all the same friends, same house and everything. And so we did that, and I loved it. For the first time in a long time, I'd looked forward to going to work, and just really was confirmed that like that's what I really, really wanted to be doing.
Good heavens. And to have three young, you had three kids, you have two living kids, but you have three kids. We're always going to say that, right? Both of us, all of us.
Mhm.
And a wife at home who was a math major, right? And what was that call? What was that conviction for you?
Well, I think it was just a sense of, I think part of it was just I had a lot of affirmation when I was in that role that
Mhm.
like things went really well. I loved it. There was a lot of fruit from the work I did, and so it just felt like, hey, this is it. But now I've got to figure out, okay, what does that look like long term? Because that was a short term opportunity. And so then that's when that led up to us moving to Chicago and going to seminary and all those things.
Yeah, that sounded like an incredible experience. And and y'all, again, you got to read the book because it gives you, he goes through his the whole process, which is, I was totally captivated. So really good. And so when you wrote this book, what were you hoping to achieve?
Well, I think part of it was just a simple. We felt like God had done some really good stuff in our life, and we just wanted to share that. And I often say like that's really what it means to be a witness. Is being a witness is not really telling somebody how to become a Christian. Being a witness is just saying, hey, this is what we've seen and what we've experienced and what God's done in our life. And so we felt like it was sort of an extension of that for us. And let's share a story, and hopefully some other people will be encouraged by it. And that was really the primary, I think, for me, objective.
Mhm.
And I'd say met, I would say that absolutely. And so, Rebecca, how being a mom and losing a child, and then saying, I want another baby, and yeah, it's just gonna happen. I want another baby, and then having to deal with more challenge with your
Right.
pregnancy.
Right. So about midway through our pregnancy with our daughter, she was diagnosed with because our first child had died with a heart problem, then they assume that there's a higher risk for the second child to also have a heart problem. So we just went into all the secondary ultrasounds because of the first child. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done these. And so they did them and said, hers is actually worse than your first child's. It was called hypoplastic left heart. And then the doctor in Greenville just said, I'm a young new doctor. I want to be wrong. Please leave and go to other places for second and third opinions. And so we did. And we went to Boston for one of the best fetal cardiologists in the country. My sister has a doctor and she worked in Boston. So she got us connected up there. And he basically said the same thing. And then we got another look at it in Atlanta, and they said the same thing. So we knew we were just dealing with something that was going to be really hard. Either she had to have 3 operations between birth and 18 months old, or a heart transplant.
And
Jay, we were talking one day, and he said, I don't think I have 1 heart surgery left in me, much less 3. But the idea of getting a transplant also means you have to have somebody else's baby's heart and to get one of those. And is that really going to work? And then the long-term effects of all that. So we found our way to the best surgeon for this surgery in Michigan, and went up there packed with my mother-in-law, and probably had 5 or 6 weeks worth of baggage with us because we thought we'd be there for the first operation, then recovery, and then at some point be able to come home before we had to go back for the second operation. And shortly after we got there, they checked everything out and were, saying, well, we've got to figure out whether they're going to do this part first or that part first. And I'm like, you can't ask me which part thing you're going to do first. Like, I don't know. And so had her pretty soon after we got there, a couple of days or so after that. And then after she was born, a cardiologist walked in the room to kind of give us the update on how things were going after she was born. And he said, her heart is perfectly normal. And to this day, it's still so hard to believe. But she was just a miracle. Like, we had people praying all along the way for a miracle. I never prayed for a miracle, didn't even dream about having a miracle. That just seemed ridiculous. We had a healing service at our church. Like, I'd never done anything like that in a traditional church, but I was like willing to do whatever I could. And so when she was a miracle, it was shocking. And Jay said at that point, he said, our lives will never be the same. And that was truly, between Brock's death and her miracle, it was like, okay, God is up to something big here. And so we have to pay attention. And we brought her home when she was about 5 days old on an airplane. I'm sure everybody on the airplane were wondering what the heck we were doing. But anyway,
Tiny baby.
this tiny baby, teeny tiny baby.
Yeah.
And she's now 29 and doing great and has never had to have one thing done to her heart, which is incredible.
It's what a miracle. I can just imagine. Jay, can you bring us to that moment that when you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, it's like the world stopped turning. I mean, it was just a moment you can still picture it. And just, I mean, it was just so shocking, it was just hard to get your mind around, because I think the way probably both of us were at that point were very specific about praying that we pick the right doctor and praying that we pick the right procedure, and those kind of prayers. Not just, would just make it all go away, that. And so it was just such an extravagant blessing and so shocking that we just we're like, wow, life's not going to be the same. You can't just say, oh, that was nice and move on, And I think that was probably part of, the thing of me getting out of business, going into ministry, because, just changed my perspective on what I was passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. So now that you're together on this path to helping people find God, and particularly in ordinary life, which is your subtitle, there are a lot of people that are struggling now with faith and on their journey and yearning in their heart, but not knowing how to find and to answer and to fulfill the longing, which I believe is the longing for God. I would love for both of you to share your strategy or tips or hopeful recommendations for people who are struggling.
Mm-hmm. You want to talk about nature? And
well, yeah, I mean, I always relate to God a lot through nature and being outdoors, and just for some reason that always connects with me when I'm in these big, huge outdoor spaces. It just reminds me of, how immense God is, and yet he still sees me and knows me. I think, I mean, we're a very spiritual culture, right? But so I think everyone has this God-given desire to be connected to God, and but we can't always figure out exactly how that looks. And I think probably I would say one of the keys is really creating space to hear God, look for God, be expectant that you're gonna see God, you're gonna experience Him in some way. And as we've talked about, journaling was huge for us. I mean, there were things we did and still continue to do that I think open you up to seeing and hearing God's voice. And I think we live in a world with so much noise, so much information, so much distraction that I think God is speaking to us all the time, and we just miss it.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I think just take it, like we said with journaling, just take a piece of paper and just say, what happened today? What went well? What didn't go well? And just did I see anything that was beyond just a random occurrence? Like, where was maybe God was in that conversation? That person was very, very kind to me, or just just trying to see where he is in your day, and documenting it. Because sometimes you may be like, well, that might have been God. I'm not really sure. But then you write that down, and then 5 days later, something else happens. It's kind of similar. And you're like, oh, that too felt a little bit like maybe that was God guiding me or prodding me to go in this direction or that meeting that I had that was not supposed to happen and was really, really good. And so sort of documenting those kind of things. And yes, being outside and looking at nature, like we were just at a retreat and some flowers and a bush that I'd never paid attention to before. I'm like, the intricacy of this flower that's this tiny, God, like you can't believe there's not a God. Like if you look at that and just believe how he creates beauty just in something that's so tiny that nobody even hardly ever notices. And so he has to be alive and well. You look at the moon at night, we walk at night some, you look at the moon at night. Last night we were looking at it and you're like, hey, this isn't random. Like there is a God that has created this universe that we get to be a part of. And so slow down, turn off your podcast. I see so many people listening to music.
You're not supposed to say that on a
not
podcast.
this podcast. So
No,
listen to
but I
this one, just not all the other ones.
Yeah, no.
Take out the earbuds, leave your phone behind, go for a long walk, just a slow walk. Like there's just so many ways that you can bump into him if you slow down. But when we're distracted and we're going 90 miles an hour, which I do a lot as well, I have not got this all figured out, but I mean, we have found him in songs that we've heard. We've found him at a McDonald's one day. We found him at just literally little pieces along a path with my work, and just running into like this notebook at this conference that blew me away. And I'm like, this notebook represents my old career and all my spiritual life all coming together in this notebook. Well, I wouldn't think that God would be found in a notebook at a conference, but because it all kind of came to me when I picked up the notebook and realized what God had done. So there are just some things that you think, I think God is up to something, but you have to pay attention and really, really pay attention. And for me, I can't remember what I did yesterday. So that's why I write everything down.
You know what? I have such an image of you. You gave me something so funny because the way you're talking and you're like, and little and maybe and I'm like, it's almost like God nibbles. We're looking for the
Exactly.
nibbles from God. Because that's
Yes.
all I was thinking of when you were talking was like, she's talking about nibbles.
Yes. Yes. Nibbles along the way that then over time build your faith. Like
Right.
this meeting with this person was amazing, and this flower was incredible, and this interaction with this person, or this prompting just to call somebody or text somebody, and they write back and they're like, how did you know to call me? Like I was in the ditch, and you're like, okay, that was a prompting from God. And those are just the small things that let you participate in the kingdom and not just think that he's not there.
Tracking the nibbles.
Tracking the numbers. Love that. That's
The
great.
new way to describe gratitude.
That's
All
right.
you gotta do is gratitude is you just track your nibbles.
Yes. Yes. And gratitude journaling is
Right.
awesome too, because you realize like just having a house over our head and a good night's sleep and a bed and all those things are things to be grateful for.
And those do bring you closer to God for sure. A lot of the time, particularly in my coaching, I've found that what gets in the way of people is the lack of feeling as though they're worthy. It comes to a worthiness. And how would you address that? That yes, we can be in gratitude, but God's too busy for me, or I'm not worthy of God's love.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I think like none of us are really worthy of God's love. I mean, that's sort of the amazing part of it, right? Is that he loves us first, and he loves us knowing all of our faults and and everything. So we're never really deserving. And yet he loves us anyway. And so I think that's part of the beauty of grace, and so we don't have to be worthy because he is. So
Isn't that something? That's just you just cosmic 2x4 me upside the head. And the reason why I say that is you take the self-help, oh, I need to do all this work before, because I'm writing a new book right now called Peaceful Ambition. And it's very much sort of on what you said, which is that your purpose is in the mess. And you figure that out while you serve, because you're never going to get yourself all figured out. You're never going to be ready for the perfect relationship or for the perfect job. Or, the self work and the social work happen simultaneously, people. And I think so much of the self help, and maybe more in the secular world, but even in the spiritual community, is that, oh, I have to do all this inner work. And that is, as you're doing that, you're actually separating yourself versus joining, because I truly believe God is in when you don't feel like it. A quick story about my middle son, Johnny, and he called me, he was crabby, real crabby. You know how they can get when they're like, younger in their teens or early 20s. But he was like, rock, 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 rock. And I was like, babe, can I ask you something? And he's like, what? And I go, can you reach out to 3 people that are struggling and just say, hey, how you doing? And he's like, yeah, whatever, all right, hung up. And that night he calls me and he's like super good mood. He's like, da da da, and everything's good, giving me an update and everything. I'm like, yeah, but babe, did you call the people? Did you call the 3 people? He goes, Mom, 5. I called 5 people. But then, so this is a perfect example of sometimes we have to stand in for people, even when they might not like what they hear. For me to say, when he was real crabby, go reach out to people for today.
Mhm.
See how that makes
Mhm.
you feel. And for our culture, that's like sounds ridiculous. How dare you? I'm not okay, right? So isn't that a funny story? It's so true and applicable, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. For sure.
It's too funny. It's such a trip. I had a question. Why Breathless Haste as a title? What does
Mhm.
that mean?
Well, it's interesting. I have a spiritual director when I was in my time in Chicago, and we were at the point at our church in Chicago that Jay was feeling a little bit of restlessness, that maybe that calling at that church was coming to a close. And we had no idea whether we were going to stay there for 10 more years or move to a church 2 miles away, or what that was going to look like. So I went to my director and I just said, hey, we're just at this point. We don't know what's happening. We don't know where we're going to go, or what God's calling us to, or what this is going to look like. And she just reached over behind her chair, and in a basket full of books and Bibles, she pulls out this Bible and opens it up to Habakkuk 2, which
Oh.
people don't read that much.
Mhm.
And she started reading it. And as she read it, it got to the point that there was this wording, breathless haste. And I've certainly never heard that in the Bible before. And after she got done with reading 2 or 3 verses, I said, breathless haste? I was like, that's how we left South Carolina to go to Chicago. Is that how we're going to leave? And just kind of
Whoa.
like threw that question out there. Like, that just resonated with me. And lo and behold, within probably a couple of months of that, we were packing our bags and moving to Atlanta to Peachtree Church out of the blue. Literally, it was like literally God picked us up, took us from South Carolina to Chicago, stayed there 6 years, and then all of a sudden he's plucking us up and he's putting us here in Atlanta. And when we came in such a hurry, we were like, have we made the right decision? Is this really correct? But Jay came down and he loved his interview with the church and the people that he got to meet. And here we are 15 years later. So I think it really was what God had for us, but it was scary. And that term, after she said it, I went back home and started looking through every Bible I had. And this was pre-Google ChatGPT. Like, I could not find the translation. I mean, I was trying to find it online, could not find it. It was a very unusual translation of the Bible. So the fact that she picked that translation to read over me that day was pivotal in our story. And I'm sure any other editor would tell us that's a terrible title and it doesn't connect with anybody. But I was like, I don't care what y'all say. This is the title of this book, because that's how God has moved in our
100%.
lives.
Well, because
Mhm.
it really is, that is the ultimate faith, is just I'm called. And we can't measure speed of anything, that if it's quick, if it's slow, but you're listening. So it's
Right,
like, it goes back to that whole image that you're just going to move where you're called. And,
right,
and I love it that you both move together into that. And it's
right,
such a beautiful image. And I just want to say, I honor both of you in being the light of what, obviously I know marriage isn't easy and all these things, but I just want to thank you for being the light of what it looks like to go through hardship and to rise into into the greatness, into what you're called here to do. I'm just so grateful to share the space here on this podcast, but also at Peachtree. So
Well, we are very grateful that we get to share it, because it has been quite a journey and a good one too. We've just cheer each other on, which has been such a gift for all these years.
Yeah, and I think that that would be like part 2 of the podcast, right? Yeah, so is there anything else that any parting words that you would like to speak into our audience and viewers today? Keith, if you can, I'd love to hear last thoughts.
Well, we just hope that you'll take some time just to read a few of these stories, that they would encourage you in your faith journey, and that you would be able to find God in your ordinary day, just based on a few nibbles that you get from this book, that you're able to look around and see God's vastness all around you. And that this book would just give you a little inspiration to look a little harder and a little closer each day.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just, encourage you that we're not any kind of super spiritual people. Like, we're just regular people, and God's just worked in our lives. And that's really what we wanted to encourage people with the book. Is this isn't a story for just certain people. Like God can and does this in all our lives in different ways, and to just be aware and on the look for that.
That's so good. Eyes wide open for the niblets.
That's right.
Rebecca's niblets.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And thank you. I really appreciate you. And may you continue to bless all of us. I'm so grateful. And thank you to all the viewers and listeners of Master Your Life. Remember, we all are on our own pillar, our own way. And to be the light for others is really the highest and best calling, to serve even in the hardest times, through the mess and through the glory. So thank you again, and have a beautiful day, everyone.
Thank you so much.